Alternate ball throwing is a combination of throwing a ball against a wall and catching the ball with the same hand that threw the ball, alternating between one another, and through this we have distinguished two movement themes: a manipulative skill of throwing and catching as you manipulate the ball when throwing, and the use of non-manipulative skills when catching the ball as you bend down to grab the ball.
Throwing and catching are considered to be closed skills as the environment does not change and is quite predictable. It is a fine motor skill as it requires precision and uses small muscle groups. The factor that may affect alternate ball throwing will be experience age, as I've had prior experience of hand-eye coordination exercises, but when it comes to this specific activity, I've had minimal to no experience. Alternate ball throwing requires a person to stay completely stationary and is considered to be a continuous motor skill as the individual determines when the skill stops and starts and is internally paced as it is determined by the individual when the activity is being performed.
This skill is placed in low complexity as it is a simple throw and catch, and is low in organization as you just need two balls and a wall to complete the movement skill. The movement concepts affect this activity as through both effort and relationship can be seen. Through effort, it is shown as the effort of how hard you need to be throwing the ball can determine the success of the activity. Relationships with the equipment are apparent as figuring out the relationship between the ball and the wall is a vital part of this skill, and as well, space awareness is also used as the subconcepts of levels can influence the success of alternate ball throwing as you can throw it low, middle, or high. Through the classification of Gentile's taxonomy, this activity aligns with the level of 1B as there is object manipulation through throwing the ball and catching said ball, as well there being no intertrial variability as it's a fixed environment where there is no external forces making the activity go faster, as the only thing that determines how fast it goes is the person.
The method of practice that we chose to use was distributed practice, as it allowed us to break down each distributed section of the activity and break it down into its most basic form. We were able to break the activity down into a simple catch and throw activity by seeing how hard the person had to throw the ball at the wall and how far it would come back. This task is intrinsically motivated as to undergo the drills that we are doing. The athlete needs to be internally motivated as the activity solely relies on the athlete's performance and the inner desire to complete the task successfully.
The use of the GLSP rating system has allowed us to determine the throwing and catching skills with my non-dominant hand. I would put myself at the second level of skill proficiency, which is the control level. This level on the GLSP states that movements appear less haphazard and seem to confirm more to the intentions that were intended. Movement is more consistent and repetitions are somewhat alike, and the skill is correct more frequently, but as well, the movement isn't quite automatic yet. The first activity practice is a single arm and single ball thrown with the less dominant hand, thrown approximately from the hip level to the eye level. This activity provides a baseline for the skill of throwing and catching. Throwing and catching is a manipulative skill that applies to the manipulation of the ball and requires fine motor skills, as it's only using a small number of muscles to perform this movement. We chose this activity as it allowed for distributed practice to be applied, as you're breaking down the action in its simplest form with learning how to do the basics of throwing and catching.
Regarding the coding of the skill catching and throwing within the GLSP, the person who is performing this activity should progress through the GLSP of pre-control to utilization to the final level of proficiency within the activity before progressing to the next activity. The level of Gentile's taxonomy would be the level of B1, which is the level where the body is stable the whole time the activity is done. Object manipulation is achieved through throwing the ball as well as catching the ball, and there is no intertrial variability as there is no game setting around this activity.